Good afternoon and welcome to AI Generated Art. My name is Lisa Richman. I've written 20 books. I write as LL Richman. 17 of these are published and 3 of them are in the pipeline for publication in 2023. My genres are science fiction and techno-thrillers. In the science fiction genre, I lean into hard science fiction and a lot of sci-fi small mission unit stories. And with me today, as long as his voice holds out.
Right, let's see. So I sound like a frog today, I apologize. My name is James S. Aaron. I write military science fiction and space opera. I'm on 14 published novels now and 4 waiting to get out to shoot, depending on how the publications work. Yeah, so if you can't understand anything I say, please Lisa can interpret, and don't be afraid to raise your hand and say, please repeat what you just said. So.
Okay, we have a lot of territory to cover, so we'll get started. We are going to talk today about what AI-generated art is. This is a 101 class, by the way. We just have so much to cover. We're going to talk about how you make art, how it can be used, what all the fuss is. If you've, every morning I wake up, there's a new news article about some of the controversies surrounding AI-generated art. We're going to talk about that. And what best practices might look like for you. And then if we have some time at the end, we'll demo it. And we'll get some prompts from you and we'll see what happens. So, James, what is generated art?
So I am not an AI scientist, but I play one on the internet. Anyway, in the research that we've done, so basically AR comes down to data sets that an algorithm works through the data set, depending on the size of the data set, that gets the complexity of what can be created. And those algorithms are changing continuously. Even as we have done this presentation, Midjourney, for instance, has moved into version 4, which is updating the realism and just the amazing things they can do. So our goal with this presentation, again, even in trying to define what AI art is, while we can call it artificial intelligence, remember that it is primarily data sets that have fed an algorithm that then you, as you learn to do text queries into that algorithm, can pull out things you could use as seeds for art or other graphic images you want to do. The question of, they use associated metadata, which is data about data that is in those data sets, to create derivative artwork. And that word derivative is where a lot of the controversy comes from.
Hold on to that word, we're going to get back to it. Yeah. So metadata is not just it's also, if you have blogs, you know that you can write descriptive tags, and they use that to scrape the information in a lot of situations. Okay, when you think of AI-generated art, or if you've heard it in the news, you think of the big 3. First one, James and I are the most familiar with, and that is Midjourney. We both have subscriptions to that. The second most familiar one is DALL-E 2, and if that name sounds kind of familiar, that's purposeful on their part. It's a mashup of Salvador Dali, the artist's name, and this guy. Aww.
And then Stable Diffusion, which is the currently most open of the 3, and you can run this on your own hardware if you have hardware that can run it. I have it.
That's the big catch.
I have kind of old at this point, 1080 Ti graphics card that can barely generate 512 by 512 images with Stable Diffusion. So if you have a gamer in the house and you can get some time on their machine, Stable Diffusion is pretty fun to play with, but it definitely gives you a good idea of the kind of processing power these other models are doing in the cloud for you when you give it a query.
And Midjourney is Discord. You can see the art that has been created by Midjourney on your browser, but they use Discord to imagine the word prompts. DALL-E 2 is, you can do it both on browser and on Discord, and Stable Diffusion.
It's just on your machine, although they just rolled out also a phone-based one just at the time we're working this presentation, which I haven't had time to play with yet. But apparently you can download it. I shouldn't say this, I think it's Android, but I know people are doing it on their phone for Stable Diffusion.
Because Stable Diffusion is an open source, you have a lot of free AI tools out there that don't charge you subscriptions or credit-based for usage. I don't know a whole lot about all of these. They are pretty limited in scope. And as we go through the PowerPoint deck, which will, you can go back to YouTube and reference this, You'll see a lot of URLs at the bottom of each slide. I'm not going to touch on any of those. You can go back and you can find them and you can go out and search and mess around with them. And we'll hold questions for later if you don't mind, because we have a lot to cover. And a lot of big companies like Google and NVIDIA are getting into it, and even Photoshop now has some AI that's being incorporated into it. So we know Midjourney the most.
Right, I mean, being science fiction writers, this is the kind of, you'll see a lot of our art leans towards SF, but these are the kind of things you can produce with Midjourney. And this, one of the things we'll talk about a little bit is sort of the tone of the art, and people that, once you start playing with this, you might start to be able to notice, like, immediately it looks like AI art. I would say that Midjourney is moving really quickly to get past that. You will start to notice certain things based on composition, framing, colors, things like that jump out to you as being generated. But many artists are using that as their starting point after they've iterated the art, and then they pull it into Photoshop, into whatever painting app they're using, and it becomes the basis for something else. But you can see that it's just getting better and better. I mean, this was version 3, I think, not even version 4. So version 4 is out now, and I'm just seeing some amazing things with it as well.
Yeah, there is. Have you heard the term the uncanny valley?
Yes.
Okay, so
No.
that's what we're dealing with. The uncanny valley, real quick, I have a film background. I worked in the industry for more years than I'll admit to, is where artificial intelligence meets reality. And if you ever saw the animated movie, The Polar Express, and you know, if Tom Hanks' character kind of gave you the willies, there's a reason why, because he looked sort of human, but he didn't really get all the way. And so the Uncanny Valley, they're working on that. You know, the AI, as it progresses, it's getting better and better.
And Midjourney in particular, one of the jokes about it right now is it does not do hands and feet very well. So we don't have any examples of it, but we'll give you some places to go look, and you can see some really terrible, people with hand, feet, and whatnot, where the artist just didn't quite
3 legs.
right. So,
Yeah.
but it's moving so fast that even I don't think it'll be a problem in another 90 days.
And they can do, like I said, we do science fiction, but they can do fantasy, they can do, children's art, kind of lanky stuff, really cool stuff. DALL-E 2, these, just so you can get a kind of feel for DALL-E 2, the word prompt to create the one on the left was Mario as he shows up on Ellis Island, and a knitted dragon.
And a lot of the examples for DALL-E 2 you'll find online there's a lot more logo work being done in DALL-E and graphic-based art versus the kind of painting, industrial design that you see in Midjourney.
And they can do, we'll talk about copyright later, but obviously you probably wouldn't want to mess with the mouse. And it's a Disney property. But that was a prompt that was Darth Vader playing cards in a bar with the stormtroopers. If you want to see how Midjourney and DALL-E 2 hold up against each other, this was the same prompt. Spaceship. Stable diffusion. Oh no, we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
A lot more than just one word.
So stable diffusion again, just we got some further slides on the resolution pieces of it. But stable diffusion is just, I'm not going to say it's better or worse than the others. I just didn't have the hardware to really do it justice, I think. I've seen some really beautiful examples of what stable diffusion can do, but I think if you have the local hardware, I'm actually very interested in being able to do it myself. Because when we talk about the pricing on these things, it can be very easy to burn through your monthly subsidy or subscription that you have. Whereas stable diffusion, you can just iterate over and over and over again. So I don't know. I just feel like the art I've seen in Midjourney, I've been very impressed by it, but I don't want to downplay stable diffusion.
Okay, the stable diffusion stuff that we're going to show you, I used Dream Studio to grab the images from, and we'll give you a slight demo here in a second. Let's talk resolution, and that's a big thing, especially if you're dealing with book covers. Stable diffusion only does 512 pixels by 512 pixels, nothing bigger. It's very small. You get a little bit better resolution with DALL-E 2, 1024 by 1024. It's still not great. However, with DALL-E 2, you can do something called, you can outpaint. And that means that you've got a 1024 by 1024 square image, and if you want to extend that image, you can go to the left or to the right. You can start building in squares And I have no idea how to do that, so don't ask me.
There are some great online GUIs that we'll touch on that basically, as we've seen, like we're going to talk mostly about text inputs, but even as we talk, like GUIs are popping up where you can feed it, like basically fill out a form, and it will populate the query for you that it feeds to the AI.
Right.
So that is an evolving technology right now.
GUI, graphic user interface.
Right,
Midjourney resolution. Midjourney is the most versatile. They have 3 different resolutions. Their default is the same as Stable Diffusion. Which go. Where's she going? Okay, well, I'm going to talk through it as I try to figure out why it's not going to go. There we go. Okay, 512 by 512 is the that's Stable Diffusion. Why are you not going? Don't. Midjourney. Yeah, why is it?
It wouldn't be a technology talk if we didn't have a technology issue.
Yeah, technology issue. Here we go. All right.
There we go.
3 different ones. So the default is just like Stable Diffusion. You can upscale to DALL-E 2, and then they can upscale to Max, which is even larger, but it's still not print quality. And their limitation is a 3 megabyte size. So.
They are introducing new pricing tiers all
Yeah.
the time. So it seems like Midjourney is definitely aiming at industrial art, and they want to come up with some pricing tiers to beat that. But one of the things
we'll talk about cost
we
tiers
shared
in
this
a
with
second.
the Discord. It is the most active Discord I've ever seen. And so the amount of input that they are getting is part of this process too. So while we
Helps
call
them
it AI, humans are having a huge impact on which way it's going. And humans definitely want more resolution. So.
And Midjourney has one other thing that, one other feature that the other 2 don't have, and that is aspect ratio.
Right. So you can really get, how we structure text inputs. You can basically set it with whatever, 16 by 9, 10 by 16, which 10 by 16 would give you an Amazon ebook. The resolution, as Lisa mentioned, is still not going to be ideal, but this is the right shape you would need. So say you're doing something on BookFunnel, just kicking that out to your newsletter list. This could be a cool way to generate art for that you're not necessarily selling, but you can make something that fits your story that will work, for that application.
Okay, let's talk about cost. Midjourney is subscription-based. It is based on rendering time. So what you get for $10 a month is 200 minutes of rendering time, and the first 25 images are free. If you want to level up, you can spend $30 a month and get 15 hours of GPU time. DALL-E 2 and Stable Diffusion both run off the credit system. You're going to get 50 free credits at sign up, plus an additional 15 free credits each month. And you can buy a block of 115 credits for $15. Similarly, Stable Diffusion through Dream Studio. Now, Stable Diffusion itself is free, but if you want to not run it yourself on your own computer and you want to, use someone else's interface that they've offered up, like Dream Studio, they're going to charge you for their time. And they will give you 200 free generations when you sign up. And then you can drop a $10 for 1,000 images. Now that sounds like a lot. How many of you guys have Dream's deposit photo subscription? Yeah, so when you think about deposit photos, that's a photo library. And that photo library has been curated by Deposit Photos by professional or semi-professional artists who have created a finished piece of art that has composition. It has white space, it has light and dark, and it's beautiful and it's finished. 1,000 images, you're not going to get 1,000 finished images. That's 1,000 images that it's going to generate based on whatever stupid words I stick in there. And my first set of stupid words is going to create crap. So it may take me 100 images or 100 image generations to get one workable image. So keep that in mind. It's not as great as it sounds. Okay. We're just going to blow through this real quick. Again, the URLs are at the bottom. If you want to take a look at this later on the YouTube channel. These are some of the free guys, and I just put these in here so you could see kind of what quality of images can be generated by these.
No, just like the koala one actually is kind of a very famous piece of, like this is where you can kind of get into when we talk about seeding and how that can kind of be an issue. I can't really name the piece of the art, but it's the Japanese wave. You see on laptop bags all the time. So somebody combined a very well-known piece of art with koalas. But if I was that, that copyright holder, I would have a problem with that. So that's where we'll touch on that a bit. But the iteration in this, like right now, it's hard, but it's going to get easier. But it is something to keep in mind. Is this right for me? Just how much time do you have? Because people that are producing the really beautiful art, they have iterated and iterated and iterated. So it's really just something to keep in mind. Like I've certainly wasted hours in Deposit Photo doing the same thing. So I couldn't tell you that one is better than the other right now. But I do like that this seems to create unique art, whereas Deposit Photos or other stock photo sites, being SF writers, we always talk about spaceship butt, right? Like you see the same spaceships on every single cover. For us, this does create more unique things like spaceships. So depending on your genre, there's one case where this might be more useful than going to a stock site that you'll see that same image repeated over and over again on Amazon. So that is one consideration.
How many of you are here because you want to see if you can use AI-generated art for your book covers? Okay. Let's talk about other uses before we get to that, because this opens up a wide, you've got a smorgasbord of stuff that you can do with this. And boy, we just jumped. Okay, that's a book plate. What if you were to create a book plate, print it out, next time you go to a con? That's a nice little piece of swag that you would have for people who show up at the con for book signings to buy your books. Oh, design elements, that's what that's called.
So maps, and this kind of gets to, there are plenty of sites out there that will procedurally generate a fantasy map for you based on inputs that you give it, which is kind of the same thing as AI art that we're talking about. But this could be used, in concurrence with one of those sites to give you background texture, to give you, scenery, things like that, that could tie into, role play, or as you're building out your world, doing your world building and things like that.
Character development is another one.
Right.
All of us, as we write books, we develop our characters. He's tall and thin, has brown eyes, brown hair. These kinds of things reside at your fingertips as you type them. But sometimes it might be kind of a nice thing to have, stick it up on your wall. You can create images that kind of give you inspiration as you write of your characters. And similarly, world building,
Right, no, same thing. So you can give it, this is a pretty standard fantasy image, but you can give it you can start with fantasy and then feed it other seeds to see what you get that will give you iterations on, where you started to get someplace more interesting. Right?
Say you write cyberpunk and you want a futuristic street in Tokyo. There's all sorts of opportunities there. You can create a mood board.
One of the things we'll talk about in the prompts is, aesthetic is very important. And so you can really just give it a prompt like seaside with, blue and orange sunset, and that you'll get a whole board of things like that.
So if you write sweet family stuff,
right.
You can do that.
I've used it to generate buyer personas.
Oh, right.
Yeah. There's all sorts of, there are a lot of uses that you can think of besides cover art. Okay, let's talk about controversies. And here's our disclaimer.
We are reasonably paranoid authors, not lawyers. So, and also just, I think we have a slide on that. Just keep in mind that this is a legal landscape that is evolving. So we'll touch on things you can do to kind of protect yourself while also trying to experiment and use this new tool. Because I think it's a really cool new tool. I think just be aware of how it could potentially bite you.
And though I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on TV, but I was in the film industry for quite a long time, and I have negotiated a lot of copyright and license agreements, and dealt with release forms, and told a lot of people at a very large name brand company no, you can't use Pharrell's Happy as your music bed. So that's where I'm coming from. What is copyright law? Copyright law, basically, you cannot copyright an idea, but you can copyright your version or your vision of the idea as it is put down on a medium, whether it's print or motion picture or film or photography or any, your version of it you own. You own the copyright, and remember the word derivation? You own all derivations of that, and you can license that, you can choose to license that out to other people, but you own that copyright. What you create, you own. So currently, if you think about AI-generated art, who owns copyright? Because the programmers created the AI engine that you put the word prompts in to create the art, and then there are seed arts that you can, pieces of art from famous people like Salvador Dali or Tom Edwards or any other cover artist, Rebecca Haskell. You could put their images conceivably in as a seed image for the AI to learn from, and then you're the one who is the person who's putting those words in. So who owns copyright? It depends. It depends upon what nation you're in, and if you have a book on Amazon and it's released worldwide, you've got to keep that in mind. Currently in the US, US law states that AI art cannot be copyrighted. In the UK, it is the copyright is owned by the person, the end user who generates the art. But law is a living, breathing entity, and it changes all the time. So really, the thing you should be concerned about is, do you really want to be the person who is pulled into the courtroom in the landmark litigation case that's going to determine what United States copyright law is going to become as this develops and becomes more. It's here to stay. The box of pen, you can't stick it back, the genie back in the bottle. The AI art is here to stay. This is as transformative as Photoshop was when it first launched. So it's not going away. And it's a good tool. All I'm saying is caveat emptor, buyer beware, be very careful. This is just from my background, this is just one simple example of how pervasive copyright is and how slippery it is. Most people don't, let's take an image, any image. Who owns copyright of that image? Well, it depends, because you've got the photographer who took the photo, but the photographer who took the photo had to get permission from every subject in that photo. And I'm not talking famous people only. If I were to take a photo of this group right here and I were to use it, say in my newsletter on, hey, I did a session on AI-generated art, technically I would have to get you to sign a release, every single one of you to sign a legal release saying that I had permission to use your likeness in my newsletter. Same thing with landmarks. Now, I'm not talking national landmarks, you can't really get a release from God, but you can worry about the Eiffel Tower and the Golden Gate Bridge and things like that. So just be careful. There's a whole lot more that goes into copyright than we might realize. And then there's this.
So these were AI generated, and we talk about using AI to do some character work. Like I want to have George Clooney as a knight in my fantasy novel. That's fine for yourself, but if you want to put George Clooney in your cover, that's going to be a problem. So that's where Lisa talks about likenesses and is the work predominantly like another artist's work that in tone and composition and things like that. Like when I was first starting playing with prompts, I would use a lot of famous science fiction artists like Chris Foss, Michael Whelan, Sid Mead, things like that, which would kind of give me the tone I wanted as I played with it. But then I stopped using their names because I didn't want there to be any question of I created something that was derivative. Michael Whelan is a working artist right now, so I really didn't want to do anything that could be seen as me ripping off their work as I was playing with how to do this. But obviously, Baby Yoda with a lightsaber is going to get you in trouble.
Again, you don't mess with the mouse.
Right.
Okay, so Dream Studio AI, I wanted to see exactly how derivative a popular image was. The image on the left is from a book that is currently in publication by Nathan Heistad. It's an anthology, and the artwork was created by Tom Edwards. The image on the right was what Stable Diffusion gave me. It's different, but it's also similar. How similar is that going to look at Thumbnail on an Amazon store? So,
and artists have been sued for, say, tracing something that was laid over another piece of art in a cover that looked similar enough in composition and other elements that became litigious. So,
just be careful. This is the Dream Studios interface, and I uploaded the seed image. And then, do you see that really bright green line there? That's a slider that says, how close do you want me to come to the original? So, pull it back a little bit.
Sue me, don't sue me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and then there's, this is a copyrighted Etsy artist image on the left, and then I use that as a seed image, and then I just told Stable Diffusion Purple Dragon, and that's what it gave me. So, I don't know that that's necessarily, yeah, it's close, but I don't know that it's terribly close. And then there's this. I used Tom Edwards' cover with Purple Dragon as my words. That's a blue dragon. So they pulled, the AI pulled the image aesthetic from Tom's seed image, but used my prompt. So there's so many things you can do. So again, we've talked about copyright law and artist lawsuit, but really what it boils down to is this. How many of you have known someone whose account has been terminated on Amazon? Okay. They can do anything they darn well please. And if someone were to launch a complaint against you for the cover you created, and they decided to arbitrarily cancel you, what recourse do you have? So just keep these things in mind as you play around with AI generated. And remember that copyright law evolves. And there's another really quick thing that I want to hit on, and that's the 30% rule myth. How many of you have ever heard, if you just take someone else's art or someone else's words or someone else's lyrics and you just change 10%, 15%, 30%, then it's no longer. That is a myth. Any lawyer is going to tell you that is a myth. And consider this example as a really strong argument as to why that's a myth. Take any 100,000 word manuscript. Change 1 out of every 10 words. Have you really changed that enough to avoid copyright infringement? You've not changed the name of the character. You've not changed the story arc. You've not changed the location, but darn it, you've changed 1 out of every 10 words. It's a myth. Okay, now we come to the fun part.
Okay, so let's we'll touch on this. So some resources, for example. How many folks are familiar with Discord? When I say Discord, okay. So Discord, if you've used Slack, Discord is very similar. It's a social media site that breaks things down. Like basically, you'll have a server, which is a community, and within the community, you have different channels. For whatever reason, I thought it was kind of odd when we first started doing this that they chose Discord as their interface, but Discord has a very robust kind of ecosystem for bots and apps and things like that. And so, like, if you say you have an artist, a group of friends that are together as an artist group and things like that, like we actually added Midjourney to our writers group, and so we have a separate channel in our writers group where we can all do individual queries and kind of play with it together. And when I show you the Discord channel, it's just going to blow your mind how busy it is. This link right here, so they basically have open invites all the time. Like if you were to go to a web browser and type in discord.gg/Midjourney, as long as you have a Discord account, it's going to take you right to that Midjourney server and you can join it. Same thing with Stable Diffusion and DALL-E. Although Stable Diffusion is kind of more folks, like they do share art they've created, and they talk about, you know, how to install it and things like that. And I mean, I have done server installs and stuff before. I wouldn't say it's really that difficult. It's just, you need the GPU power. I mean, if you've already got a good GPU for gaming, you know, I would say probably at least a 3070 Ti, you can play with Stable Diffusion pretty carefully, you know, pretty easily.
You can also use a place
And
like Dream Studio
yeah,
on your browser, any
So,
browser.
I mean, it really actually, when I installed Stable Diffusion, it just made it so apparent to me how much data they're crunching to get these images. Because my computer it took like 10 minutes to do what, you know, Midjourney could spit out in 30 seconds, which is really interesting to me. So okay, some other resources. If you're familiar with Reddit, I always hesitate to recommend Reddit because parts of Reddit are terrible, but other parts are fine. It's just like the internet. But there are communities around Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and DALL-E where people are both sharing art they've created and debating questions around the arts and things they run into. There was a really interesting, a writer posts up their new cover that they created. And, hey, look at this! I'm never going to have to pay a cover artist again, and just got destroyed by the community. Yeah, which was kind of entertaining. But there were some good just discussions around people that are really engaging with this. So I think that's where you can get the most up-to-date information around it. YouTube, if you do a search by the engine you're looking for, a tutorial, I would say there's, you know, as of right now, 2022, there's a very robust group of people that are, you know, because they're getting a lot of engagement on it, so there are a lot of good tutorials out there that will walk you through it. There's one in particular that you made a comic book using Midjourney and then using GPT-3, I think, to make the text. I'm still not sold on text AI creation. But as far as like a kind of LSD-fueled, you know, thing, it was a comic book. So GitHub is the other place where that's just where you can post. People will post their query strings. And the other cool thing about at least Midjourney, I'll say, is that whenever somebody posts a query on the server, you can see what they did. So it's very open in that respect, where it's not like people are posting art and you have no idea how they made it. You know, one thing that was really interesting between when we added it to our server and Lisa and I were playing with it, Lisa would do a query and it looks great. I do a query and it looks like garbage. And the exact same query, I'm just like, Lisa likes you better than me. And she did bring up the question, like maybe, because she was using it more than me, maybe she was training it and it was paying more attention, like she was getting a different output than I was. So that was kind of an interesting thing to play with. But do remember that if somebody, you're not ever going to get the exact same output that someone else did, but you can always see how they structured their query as you iterate. And then Instagram, these are just a quick grab of some. There are a ton of Instagram accounts out there, people that are calling themselves AI artists. And I mean, at this point, like these are people that will iterate for hours with the AI and then pull it into Photoshop or Corel and paint over it. And it
That's a good way to use AI generator, is to pull it into Photoshop and use it as kind of a base plate and paint over it.
And it's just a matter of time until Photoshop incorporates.
Yeah, they're already working on that. Yeah, Adobe Max this year they announced that they are doing responsible AI.
Right. Okay, so
You have 12 minutes.
as we talk, it's 12 minutes. All right. As we talked about, queries are built through work. Like it's a text-based query, unless you're using one of the graphical user interfaces we've talked about. But for the piece I'm going to show you with Midjourney, it's all text. So key subjects and descriptors, basically a noun, a knight, comma, silver armor, comma, white horse, that kind of thing. Phrases that denote action, and the action phrases are what will help you get to the framing of the composition. So you'll see where different people use different words like standing, full body, portrait, things like that. And then the AI reads that, based on what it's the database is querying, and that will give you the composition you want. Because I'll say that getting the right composition is pretty hard. And sometimes it's easier to try and get a larger, like 16:9 image, and then pull that into Photoshop and do your cropping and playing with it there. But that's where the resolution kind of bites you. So as the resolution gets better, it'll be easier to do that. But for right now, like just moving a subject around in the image can be challenging. That's where that iteration really comes in. Descriptions to add flavor, so this could be things like cinematic, neon,
Volumetric lighting,
ray tracing, things of that nature. And then specific operands vary by engine, and they're updated all the time, but that could be, for instance, aspect ratio 10 by 16. That'll give you the aspect ratio that you want. Mid-journey, you can also tell it to use a specific engine
Octane render.
that will give you specific iterations of what it even looks like. So what are we backwards?
Okay.
So you can kind of see how we built one. That this kind of gets to some of the previous examples we showed you. And I guess I'll say one thing that I try to do is because I try to be systematic about it, you'll see some people will just dump a paragraph of words in there. And I try not to do that because I can't tell what is actually impacting the output. But you'll certainly see examples of people who do that. So I'll try to be a little more systematic. To spaceship and battle, like what do I get if I start with battle and then spaceship? What do I get if I start with blue planet, spaceship, battle, and see how the word order affects the composition? And then typically the colors and the mood, the aesthetic and things like that, I add at the end because that's where it kind of draws those things into the image. And then for this one again, we had aspect ratio, but we also could have added, what engine and things like that. So yeah, like I mentioned, word order matters. The same query will create random art. And this is fun to play with, but just remember that it's costing you money every time you do it. So I will say that like the $10 a month tier on Midjourney took a little bit of the fun out of it because I just felt like I'm spending money every time I do this. I want to just be able to like play with it and see what I can get.
And there's the old adage of good, fast, cheap, pick two.
Exactly.
Where do you want to spend your time? Is your time better spent butt in chair, hands on keyboard, writing your story?
I'm a writer, that's what I get paid to do, so it's I don't know, we can talk about that some other time. So, pardon me. Experiment with color, new phrases, characters, like we mentioned, start with an actor. But that all gets to what is the purpose we're trying to make. Like if you're making a character board, that's fine. If you're making a cover image, I'll probably stay away from actors, as we mentioned. And then again, this is changing so quickly. That's why we really wanted to give you those resources and places to go where people are talking about it, because that's where you're going to get the most up-to-date information on how to use the systems.
Okay,
So
and then,
do you want to switch over to Discord a little bit?
yeah, let's do that real quick.
Okay, so if you're familiar with the Discord interface, this will make sense to you, but each of the circle icons along the side here is a server. The one with the little ship, that's Midjourney, and then each of these is a channel. Let's hope it's going to load. Okay, so already, like we had this up, I want to say before we started this presentation, and you can already see where the slider bar is in the time of people adding things to this channel doing queries. And they have, I want to say, 30 of these channels that are people constantly generating prompts. It's just go. So one of the things to think about, like, okay, I don't want to spend all my credits, but I just need an image for my newsletter. This is all copyright. I mean, this can't be copyrighted, right? So you could use these images for something that I would say is low stakes that you're comfortable with. You can use that because these images can't be copyrighted.
I use this AI generated art in my Facebook ads. That's another use for it.
Yeah, but that's also a pretty low stakes application. If you need to, I mean, obviously it sucks if you have a great ad that's making you money, but if you need to change that image out, you could do that.
Yeah.
It's not a
Or if Facebook decides at some point that they are not going to allow AI generated art, okay, fine. They'll stop the ad, and I'll just go to a different image. I'll go to a deposit photos image, and that's another thing. Shutterstock just announced that they are going to accept AI generated art. Getty Images is not, so it's
Maybe it's just the connections.
Connection so slow. Do you want to try to imagine?
I think if we can just show, I think it's better to show the kind of different examples that are over here. One thing I wanted to point out with Midjourney too is the way it kind of creates things. Just go until we can see one of the quad examples. Sorry, okay. So when you start your query, it's going to give you this kind of quad image right here. And so if you want to, if you U2 through 4 and the V,
one through 4.
Yep, U1 would be this upscale. And then so you would choose what you want from left to right. U1, that would upscale it. Now say you like the composition of U3 or 3 in there, you could do V3, and that will give you variations based on that image, and then you can build from there. Once you make an account with Midjourney, you'll actually have your own, on their website, you kind of have your own art feed, so you don't have to necessarily worry about losing your art in this massive flow, because you can go to your website and see everything that's on there. I will say though, if you see an example here that you like, it's a good idea to give it a little thumbs up or something so you can find it later, because that is the thing for me that's just so overwhelming about the amount of art that's flowing through here, is that you'll see something cool, and I've gotten into the habit of screenshotting it so I can get the query they used, because there's just no way to go back and find it very easily.
There are 50 general image channels,
Yeah.
and they are all that fast. They're constantly updated.
And the general ones are people that have subscriptions. There are newbie channels, which I think if you scroll up, that's folks that, so those are just new people. One thing about Midjourney too, I should point out, is they, doing the math, at $10 a month, I'm sure they're making money, but I don't quite know no one quite knows what their business model is yet. Like, what is their end goal with what they're doing? So that is one thing to kind of keep in mind. Depending on where you want to invest your energy. Like right now it feels like, be aware of what's out there, be knowledgeable what it can give you, how much time you waste on it, is it worth your time? If your time is best spent writing, I would recommend doing that. But then being aware of what's out there, because a year from now it can be a very different landscape. And this is an evolving business that we don't really know what they're going to do with this yet.
Yeah.
So that's the piece for me that's a little bit like, are we giving them all this input and then they're going to turn around and sell it to Amazon or something like that? Like, I don't know, but that's very interesting to me about this landscape right now.
We have 2 minutes left. I don't know if we have enough time for it. I think we're done with our slide deck. I don't know if we have any questions.
Was there a question?
Yeah, so if you see other art that other people
I'm sorry, come to the microphone.
Yeah.
if you see other art that other people have generated, can you use that for your own stuff in the U.S. because it's not copyrighted?
Yeah.
Okay.
For now.
For now. That's that's key.
For the Midjourney pricing, it says like $10 for so many minutes of what? What are those minutes?
That's processing time, how long it takes.
Yeah.
So
if it takes me an hour to come up with one image that I'm happy with, that's 1/2 of, or 60 of the 200 minutes that I.
Yeah.
So it's how long I spend on there fiddling with it.
Right.
Does it normally take very long for it to generate? Does it generate instantly, or does it
30
take
seconds or so.
10 to 15 seconds.
Yeah, it depends.
And it's not the time, it's not the time that you're on the UI, it's the time it's spending doing the
You
processing.
said
Okay,
using
so
the
if
name
I
of
so if I
actual
was sitting here
artists.
for
What
5
about
minutes thinking about
dead
what words I
artists?
want
No
to use,
charge.
that's not
What about, I'm
gonna
sorry, what,
happen.
say that again?
What about dead artists? You said using.
If their estate
Let's just say maybe even
holds the copyright,
then that means you get around
It's-
400 images per day. Okay, thank you. That's very good.
yes, US copyright is life of the artist plus 75 years. But it could be, it could change.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying right now is you would use AI art for ephemeral purposes like advertising, but you wouldn't use it for a book cover.
I personally would not use it for a book cover. That would, if Amazon decided to terminate my account, I would not be happy.
I would also ask your artist if they're using AI art in their work.
Yes.
Because that could be an issue.
That's a really important thing, and I know we're almost out of time. There is someone who was terminated, and and she questioned Amazon about it, and Amazon said, well, you have to prove that you own all of the images in your book cover. And fortunately, she had used Deposit Photos, and she had the standard license, and she had proof that she had purchased those images. So that has happened. Just keep that in mind.
Okay, and then there's no amount of sort of post-production in Photoshop that will mean that it's definitely yours.
You can overpaint. You can use that as a reference sketch and overpaint. I don't think that that's a problem at all. Okay, and we are done from the recording. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, you can come up here and we'll stick around and talk to you. Thanks.